Hey everyone, Jim Phoenix here, and today's What's Cracking, we've got a special guest from the East Coast. No, not Boston, Lakers forever. We've got the far East Coast. That's right, we've got none other than Sadhu Dah, the Exorcist Supreme. All this and more on Next What's Cracking. Hit it. Wait just now. Hey everyone, Jim Phoenix here, and today's What's Cracking is something special. We are getting a guest all the way from the other side. No, not deaf. The other side of the planet. We've got none other than Sadhu Dah coming from us from the Far East. Thank you, Sadhu, for coming here, man. I'm excited to see you.
It's great to be here, man.
I've got so many questions about mysticism and exorcisms and spiritualism, a lot of isms. I have a lot of questions about isms. You are the premier ghost expert for Eastern mysticism. Eastern, what would you want to call it? Is it mysticism, spiritualism? What would it be?
Yeah, so I would call it, if we wanted to be very particular, Thai shamanism.
Okay, Thai shamanism. How does that develop historically? I'm new to
Well,
that one.
we have to go back to before the creation of Thailand as we know it today, which used to be a region known as Siam a few hundred
Right.
years ago. I mean, not even that long ago that changed from Siam to Thailand, but specifically as a region, you had this collaboration of sorts between cultures of Cambodia with the Barang, this famous black magic that comes from there, a lot of ghost magic. You
Cool.
had some of the Vietnamese Hmong practices of shamanism. You even had a little flavor of Malaysian Taoism, all mixed together with the Lana and the Khmer practices, and not to forget Nat worship, which comes from Myanmar, also known as Burma.
Right.
So in the 13th, 14th century, we were introduced to Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism in
Okay.
Thailand. But as with many cultures across the world, through colonization and things of this sort, which Thailand has never been colonized, it's been invaded twice by Burmese and by Japanese, but never been colonized. But cultural colonization did
Right.
happen, and that is different,
Oh, very much
but
so. That's amazing.
deep
I
rooted.
deep rooted cultural. So deep rooted cultural, kind of like a kalaloo or a gumbo, really.
Yes,
I've been
yes,
cooking it lately. We have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, mixing in. So
exactly.
that's gonna be that version.
So what
Nice.
people practiced before was a lot of nature-based worship. So a lot of gods, spirits, deities, this, that, and the other.
Right.
And Buddhism is very much so about the Dhamma and the Buddha and the Sangha, the monks, right? So it's a very, very different thing. That's why in Thailand you have the use of amulets, right?
Oh yeah.
So the one that I'm wearing right now, this golden piece, is made from a soldier's forehead bone.
Really?
So this is the actual forehead bone of a soldier. And in the back are his ashes. And then you have takrut. Takrut are these rolled Khmer written spells on like a piece of like metal. It can be bone, it can be hair. Some you have like tiger
Right.
takruts with the tiger skin, right? So and you have these compositions of materials that come together, which are blessed and gathered in very specific ways, and then they're imbued with this magic, what we call witcha. So the witcha is imbued into it, and the kata, or
Right.
some people would be more familiar with the word mantra, so or prayers,
Right.
are spoken into it, and it's charged and consecrated with the living energy and power of the monk or the Ajahn Ulusi, the shaman who makes it. And then this is given to somebody, and it'll have the effect anywhere from helping someone with love affairs, gambling, business, wealth, luck, can be protection, opening psychic senses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They got amulets for everything. And there's many different classifications and types of amulets for everything that has a specialty within those amulets. That is what's very, very unique about the Thai practices.
So let me get this straight. This lot and unpack. It's kind of like the old remembrance lockets where they would take a piece of, when someone dies, they took the hair or a bone and they put it into a little locket, an ember, and then you have that. But it goes beyond that because you're also making spells as a talisman and putting the energy into it,
Right.
right? Okay.
So the way it differs is you enter into a negotiation with the spirit. So
Okay.
for those who believe in the occult or follow some of those mysticism type of traditions that get into those esoteric practices, what we're talking about is somebody who has the ability to see or communicate with these types of
Right.
individuals, these entities, and they're then able to kind of strike a deal with them. And the spells themselves, not only do they empower and anchor and also kind of hold the word as bond over what it is, but the person who owns it then has a secondary responsibility, which is the making of tambun, or like merit. They have to create good karma for the spirit. So when the
Okay.
karma of that spirit reaches a certain point, it can reincarnate and it can have a higher incarnation than what it naturally would have. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. It's not a parasitic relationship.
No, it's more of a circular deal where if you give me help here, I will make sure I'm using that help in a good way. Therefore, when you become reincarnated, you may go a little bit higher plane.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. I never heard of that before. And I did look through the store and I see the amulets. I'm like, this is really cool. This is my jam, really. I have a couple bazillion questions now, of course, because I did study at the Vatican, oddly enough, years ago. And I
Interesting.
remember, I know early Christianity, they had talismans as well, and those were made out of anyone listening, human flesh.
Mm.
And then it went to animal flesh because people were like, oh, I need mom and dad around somewhere. So I'm guessing, okay, yours came from the actual using and infusing of the amulet, and the Christianity version was it like the just a regular talisman, but there was no payoff. It's more parasitic, it's more like this is what you're gonna do for me and good luck, you know. So I think it might have been a mixture of cultures there. I'm not saying who comes first, but it appears that there's a more of a karmic or more of a beneficial nature in the version that we're talking about now versus the
Absolutely.
protected, right?
There's a very interesting practice. Not many people who, so I've been living in Thailand for a few years now, and I full time I do this.
Right.
This is my day job now. I
Cool.
teach people, I make amulets, I sell amulets, I deal and I flip them, and I study and I learn with different monks, Ajahn and Lucy. And one of the really fascinating things I found out is so there's a type of amulet called a Hun Pan.
Okay.
Hun Pan means robot guardian. And what these used to be, they're a very old style of amulet where they were made out of like a straw effigy, and it just kind of looks like a little like Wicker Man. Like think of like
Right.
Blair Witch Project, right? So like or like Burning Man, right? So you have
Yeah.
this like little like straw man, and what is done is John the Lucy monk will condense very, very strong mental energy in a state of samadhi, or like a higher state of
Right.
consciousness in this meditative state. They will imbue the focus of a task. This is very similar when we're talking about like, ceremonial magic and like Wicca, and like when we're speaking about like egregores and servitors. This is kind of the Thai version of that.
Okay.
And so what it is it's a non-intelligent, sentient energy force that has a simplistic function, and it carries it out as the name suggests, a robot guardian. And they would use these in the old fields, like for farmers to keep, um, you know, vandals and like robbers away.
Right.
And I've had experiences where a student of mine bought one of the hoon pounds, and she went away on vacation and she said the kata and she gave the offering and she asked the hoon pound to protect the house. And then she got a ring notification that picked up a person in her home.
Really?
And she's like, what? And so she goes and looks at it, thinking like someone broke into her
Yeah.
home. And there's a shadow. It's just like this shadow pacing back and forth for a few seconds on frame and then disappears. And she's like, Sadhu, what was that? And I was like, okay, so you told your Hunpan, you did the appropriate offering, you gave the kata, and you instructed it, and it's just doing that, and you happened to catch it on camera.
That's
You saw the
amazing.
Hunpan patrolling the house.
That's so
So
cool,
like
man.
there is sometimes paranormal phenomena that's observed, but these Hunpan, what's really fascinating is one of the modern renditions of them is you'll have some monks that will gather very, very strong karma, and they'll join this karma with the temple, and then people can be
Okay.
connected to this when they give offerings and donation to the temple, and they can receive some of this karma. It's like a transfer, like
Right.
switching money from different bank accounts, right? And you're giving out the interest to other people. So what they do is they go to death row inmates and they bring a contract to
Really?
them while they're still alive, and they say, hey, we understand you're going to die.
Right.
You've made the choices that you've made. We can't do anything to get you out of the situation. But if you want, we can help you prepare for your next life. And if you sign your name on this, if you voluntarily agree, then once you pass away from
Right.
execution, we will come and collect some ingredient from your body. It could be hair, it could be skin, whatever they're using to make the
Right.
hun pound.
Damn, that's right.
And then they will make this hun pound, and it has this bandit or this murderer or this you know person who lived a sinful life, who is now dedicating their spirit to helping people and protecting, so that they build good karmas, so that it can kind of help neutralize
Yeah.
some of the karma of that life, so they might go into the next life just reset, not necessarily a higher incarnation,
But another chance.
but definitely not
Right.
lower.
Right. Just one more chance. That's pretty good to really think about life as a never-ending process, and it is
The
a
volume
way
went down
to.
low for some
Oh,
reason.
how about now? Good. No. How about now?
I can hear you a little bit. I don't know what
Oh,
happened.
I can talk louder if you want. Is this better?
Yeah, I can hear you
Okay.
now.
All right. Cool.
I mean, kind of.
Kind of. Well, it's going to be like this. If you have this as a never-ending life, right? And you have the ability to pay it forward, and say, I might have messed up in this life, but I'm gonna want a second chance and be cognizant of trying for a second chance. I think that's a little bit of redemption story, right?
It is. It definitely is.
Yeah. And that redemption story is gonna be both for what you can do in this life, but it's also redemption for the people coming to this inmates, because they can then say, listen, I know you did some bad things, but I'm going to help you out in the next life if you want. If you want, you can do all these things.
Exactly. And that's why it becomes this big act of generating karma, because you're you're not just the spirit benefiting the person, and the person who owns that amulet benefiting,
Right.
them, right? But it's the people who donate money to the temple, which is making those amulets. It's the monks who went to those death row inmates. It's all the people in the community, right? It becomes a seed that sprouts into something much larger. And that's
Yeah.
something I don't see in the US with, you know, um, a lot of different religious organizations, which is not me criticizing, but what I find very interesting is how deeply spread community spiritualism is in Thailand. Like we have Sanpa Kum, You see them everywhere around here, and they're little spirit houses, and they're for the wandering lost ghosts, and people give them offerings, some
Really?
out of fear that maybe the ghost can make them sick, some just want to give the ghost shelter, but literally every street you go on, every building, government institution, home, business, everywhere has a sanpakum, and it looks like a little dollhouse. They're everywhere here in Thailand, and it's for the lost ghost, and they're given offerings every day.
Oh, that's very cool. That's a very good community service, and it's a very well taken care of each other. And I think you're right. That is sorely missing in other places of the world, where it's kind of like we'll take care of you if you take care of us, versus taking care of everyone, which I think should be like a human objective, just to take care of everyone and give people who may be lost in this world or the next a little place to go. So I think that's admirable. Now, do you ever have anything that's going to be more of the wicked ways? Like, I see you're also an exorcist. Is that going to be for a person, for an object? Is it attachment? Is it infestations? What?
So we have different classifications. So the way that I look at objects and people and homes, usually homes is connected with a person. But when we're looking at objects, it's honestly it's less entertaining than you would think, especially we're thinking about like some Annabelle doll, stuff like that, right?
Right.
By fire, brother. Cleanse it by fire. Just burn it.
Let's burn it.
Just destroy it. Simple enough. Like really, that's my answer. When it comes to dealing with cursed objects, that's always been my approach. One of my mentors had a collection of very, very extremely haunted and disturbed items. And yeah, something happened at one point with a student, and some of that stuff got out, and he had to track it all down, do a whole bunch of like casework, helping people, had to destroy all the items, and he said, "Yeah, I'm just not collecting cursed objects anymore." And he had it under lock and key, but I mean, never misunderstand ignorance and curiosity
Right.
wrapped together, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to people, though, I have a very, very unique approach. So exorcisms and extreme hauntings is the one service I never charge for. You want to buy an amulet for me? Okay, let's talk price. You want to do, lessons with me? You want to learn magic? You want to study? Okay, let's talk price. Your family's in danger. Your life is in danger. That costs nothing. Let me give everything I possibly can to help you. And that's how
Right.
I've always operated. It's the one service I don't charge for, because the way one of my teachers instructed me is, he's like, you call 911 because a burglar just broke into your house and he's got a knife to your wife's throat. Does the 911 operator tell you to give your credit card number before the police are dispatched? No.
Oh,
The
mine
police show
always
up and they
did.
do their
Dang
job.
it. Yeah. No, that's it.
Your
Yeah.
house is
That's
burning
it.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you need to give the fireman money before he runs in to put out the fire? No. It's a service work to your community. And when you choose the responsibility of taking on this type of work, as dangerous as it is, you choose to fill a certain role in your community.
Yeah.
And so when I'm dealing with people who have a haunting, I have to look at it in the staging of it. Is it stage one, stage two, stage three? Stage three is possession. Stage three is we're immediately going in guns blazing. We're separating the attachment from the person, which involves some pretty heavy work. And then at that point, this is the part people don't like to hear. This is the part that isn't often talked about in paranormal communities. Once you successfully um, break a possession, then you're dealing with a house haunting, because the entity has to stage things. It's
Right.
it's very, very predictable the way this works. It's down to a science. I have a whole book written on demonology where I explain how these entities hunt, operate, countermeasures, all of it. I explain different entity classifications, all of this stuff. And one of the things I can tell you is, so generally what they want to do is they want to induce rapport with you, because if they don't have connection with you, they can't try your meat suit on, they can't try you on for size, so they have to induce rapport first. And by inducing rapport, that means they need to bring you down to your level because you resonate higher than they do. So, who are the perfect people for this? These are people that have trauma. These are people that have mental diagnoses. These are
Right.
people who are struggling in some way, shape, or form. They're more susceptible. They're easier to isolate and target in a family setting, or they're less likely to reach out for help if they live by themselves. So these are the perfect targets. Then you want the induction of fear, right? And this creates the ability for it to generate more energy, to feed more, to grow stronger. And then at that point, you get the bridging, or that is internal and external
Okay.
oppression, which is an internal and external assault at the same time, which then leads to possession. Um, so when I get into a situation where it's stage one, we have stuff going on in the house, we can generally resolve that within a couple of sessions if it's pretty light or it just started, and then there's no more haunting. Or it can take a couple of months if it's already a little bit more progressed. If it's already in a state of possession, we might be able to get the person kicked down to stage one or early stage two
Okay.
within a session or two. And that's a big deal. That's really, really good. But then we might be dealing with a low level haunting for a year or two, which I've seen in a lot of cases. But that's a lot more manageable than you literally being possessed by an entity, having something knocking and throwing things around and just being like, okay, time to go get the war water out. Like, that's
Yeah.
much more preferable than the alternative. It eventually dissipates, but it takes time.
So where do the spirit of the person, where does that go when being possessed?
Spirit of the person is kind of essentially condensed. So
Okay.
think about if you were to put, let's say we have a cup of water that's half full, and I were to put an object inside of there. The water will displace, but it doesn't go anywhere, right? It just displaces, and that
Yeah.
object will take up resonance and it'll fill more volume in that space. So, with these types of entities, they tend to kind of inject themselves into the neurology.
Okay.
They prefer what's called the Wingate channel in Taoist methodologies, which is the nape of the neck, the brainstem. And from there, they can kind of like control the electrical impulses of your body. They can hijack your neurology that
Right.
way. So it's not even necessarily that they're literally inside your body. If we think about what our aura is, think of them like
Mm.
hugging the aura and then penetrating into the back of it through an outlet basically, and
Okay.
then being able to kind of like try it on like a glove and pull this and pull that and see
Ugh,
what this does and work it and manipulate it.
creepy.
It's terrifying, actually. It's
Yeah.
it's quite terrifying.
Oh, I'm almost afraid I asked now. I'm like, oh man, that's a great answer. Because I was wondering like what happens at that. And now here's a question then. What happens if the person dies possessed?
That's a pretty bad scenario, and I've seen that happen on cases. You can't save them all.
Right.
Um, and if you do any research on exorcists, you'll find there is a common theme of this and this in this case, like they might have succeeded or not, but the person died, right? So at a certain point, the toll can be too great on the physical body, and that alone can exhaust the life force of the person. And if the exorcism was successful, then the person has passed away. I mean, we could say technically under natural causes, like heart
Right.
attack or something like that, right? But but it's not necessarily spirit induced at that point. But then if you're looking at somebody who was still in a state of possession when this occurs, then what has happened is you have this displacement of the soul. And this soul is now within vibratory alignment of this entity. And it can become a
Oh.
used device like a wraith under this demonic entity. Okay. And then what ends up happening there is you have to banish the entity, and then you need to essentially cross the person's spirit, but you have to kind of purify them first. So, are you familiar with the term wraith?
Yes. Yes, I
Okay.
am. Yeah.
So yeah, like a corrupted human spirit.
Yeah.
So essentially, a person can naturally become a wraith, if they die under the right circumstances, suicide, murder, things like that, right? But they can also be pushed to that if they wouldn't have
Okay.
become one. And then if they're under the influence of a demonic entity, then they can kind of, it would appear that they're in collusion together, that they're working together, but
Right.
really it's just this wraith is no longer really the intelligence of a human. They're kind of like a reactionary force, and they're emotionally reacting, and the entity itself will kind of instigate, or it'll kind of push the buttons of this wraith, and it'll have it essentially hunt or get victims for it, and then it can feed off of the killing. So it'll
Really?
just kind of swoop in and it will consume the ether, the energy from that.
Hmm. That's
They'll use them
interesting.
as basically like hunting dogs.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like the old Dracula story. Like one guy brought Dracula all the people to all the victims, and Dracula kept them alive just enough to keep doing that. I
Right.
like that.
But this would be like if that guy was on autopilot and didn't know what he was doing.
Right. Right. And that brings me to my next question. This is really good. So if I want to avoid infestation, I want to avoid being possessed, what are the early stages? What can I do to stop it before it starts?
Really good question. So if you want to stop it before it starts, there's two really essential things that you could do. One would be working on your own resonating field. So the Institute of Heart Math has found that we have, depending upon stimulation and et cetera, like we have a 8 to 12 foot radius of electromagnetic field that
Okay.
emits from our hearts. So like when we think about like what powers the body, literal electricity. Electricity actually powers our body. So our heart emits this electromagnetic field, which can be measured. And when you interact with people, right, it has a resonance of its own. It's like somebody's in a really, really foul mood. They can bring you down, right? So they're
Right.
they're affecting your EMF field. And so if we're affecting our own EMF field, if we're able to manipulate our own EMF field, that means that we could actually resonate at a higher level. But how do we do that? Cultivation of sadhana. Sadhana is a daily spiritual practice. Now, I'm not telling you have to go find a guru or a master or anything like that, but doing practices such as yoga and qigong, tai chi, right?
Yay.
And having these sort of practices that cultivate and cleanse, renew, and build our energy, it's the spiritual equivalent of lifting weights, and it makes us stronger, and it has us vibrating at a higher resonance. So if we could do that, then not only are we able to be at a higher level of cultivating our own energy, we have a greater degree of control with it. And so with that greater degree of control with it, we are able to prevent obstacles or penetrative forces from overriding us.
Right.
And the other part of that is also working on one's trauma,
Oh,
because trauma is something that these entities, when they take over the neurology, right, they the way that they're so effective and so cunning is that they're able to use your trauma against you. So what you might find scary in a horror movie is not really what's truly scary. But imagine you're unable to wake up from a dream and you're reliving your worst trauma that's ever happened in your life, and you're feeling it, full sensory feeling it, all
yeah.
five senses, experiencing it on a loop infinitely. And it's only been a few minutes, and you've experienced that trauma on a loop for the equivalent feeling of 100 years.
Yeah. It's it's enough to make
So
anyone go,
that's
ah.
essentially what I was out there first. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it's like putting in reps, would call it. Like put your reps in, and yoga, and I love the ones you're mentioning, Tai Chi and Qigong. Like I do those. I'm like, yay, awesome. Can't I'm working on my trauma later. So all this is great information. And if people want to reach out to you, they can go to the Sada, the
Yeah, so
THESA.
it's the sadhudah.com. It's
Yep.
THESADHU DAH.com. Yeah, the sadhudah.com.
Great. And we also have the Etsy store. I look at your Etsy store, not score, sorry. And I see the amulets, and I have to say, these look really good. And these are all the ones with the energy field. I'm looking at the animal amulets, spell candles, and we got the magic wax and oil, spirit bound amulets right there. That's what I'm looking at right now. And a perfect score on Etsy. I love it. So I love that people can get across the world, get the help they need from you, right? That's an amazing thing. And I have to say, thank you very much for being a guest. I look forward to seeing more from you. And I want to say thanks again for making this time. I know it's got to be late night for you right now. So I want to say thanks again.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Been great. Thank you very much. All right. And that's it. If you want more, you must follow the click through links. Go to the website, go check it out. And of course, you can always contact us at What's Cracking, and we will be sure to give you those links. That's it for me. Thank you very much, my special guest, Sadhu Dah. We've learned a lot. We got scared and we learned. I love it. This is me, Jim Phoenix, signing off. Thanks, everyone. Bye.